The cactus in my rented studio apartment died yesterday. I stood there staring at it, this shriveled brown thing that used to be vibrant green, and thought about how even a plant that's supposed to thrive in the Tucson desert couldn't survive under my care. Gregory would have known exactly what to do. He had this way with plants, with everything really, that made life seem so much easier than it actually was. I water it every day now, this dead cactus. Like somehow drowning it will bring it back. The same way I keep texting Gregory's old number even though I know he changed it. The same way I drive past our house on Catalina Foothills Drive every Tuesday after my shift at the dental office, where I now work as a receptionist for $14 an hour. My name is Pamela, and 3 months ago I destroyed my marriage with a lie that spiraled so far out of control I still can't believe it actually happened. People always think affairs are about passion, or falling out of love, or meeting someone irresistible. Mine wasn't any of those things. Mine was about being bored and selfish and thinking I was smarter than I actually was. Gregory and I had been married for 11 years. We met when I was working at a high-end real estate firm downtown, and he was the contractor renovating our office space. He wore these paint-splattered jeans and had sawdust in his hair, but when he smiled at me over the reception desk, I felt something I hadn't felt before. Safe. That's what Gregory was. Safe and steady and real in a way that the polished real estate agents I dated before him never were. We bought our house 7 years ago, this beautiful adobe-style place with a pool and a view of the mountains. Gregory did most of the renovations himself, staying up late to retile the bathroom, building custom shelves for my book collection, creating this outdoor kitchen where we'd host dinner parties for our friends. I used to complain about the construction dust and the noise, rolling my eyes when he'd show me paint samples. Now I'd give anything to have sawdust on my kitchen counter again. The problem started when I got promoted to senior sales associate at the real estate firm. Suddenly I was working with bigger clients, going to fancier showings, attending these networking events where everyone drove cars that cost more than Gregory made in a year. I started noticing things I'd never cared about before, like how Gregory's truck had rust on the bumper, how his idea of a nice dinner was the local Mexican place where they knew our names, how he'd rather spend Saturday working on the house than at the country club mixers my coworkers invited me to. I want to be clear about something. Gregory never held me back. He was proud of my success, encouraged me to go to every event, bought me a new laptop when mine died right before a big presentation. But somewhere along the way, I started seeing his contentment as complacency, his satisfaction with our life as a lack of ambition. I was 38 years old, and suddenly wondering if this was all there was. And that's when I started lying about the networking events. Not big lies at first, just saying they ran later than they did so I could grab drinks with my coworkers afterward. Gregory would be asleep when I got home, and I'd slip into bed feeling like I'd gotten away with something thrilling. Like I was living this secret life even though all I was doing was drinking overpriced martinis and complaining about clients. Then Landon joined our firm. Landon was everything Gregory wasn't. Drove a white Mercedes, wore Italian suits, talked about his beach house in California and his ski trips to Aspen. He was the kind of man who ordered wine by the vintage and always picked up the check with a Black American Express, the kind of man I'd started thinking I deserved. The first time Landon asked me to dinner, I told Gregory I had a showing that ran late. The second time, I said it was a client meeting. By the third time, I'd created this elaborate story about a mandatory team-building weekend in Sedona. Gregory helped me pack, reminded me to bring sunscreen, told me to have fun, and kissed me goodbye like he always did. I remember sitting in my car after he went back inside, knowing I should turn around, knowing this was wrong. Instead, I drove to the Fairmont Princess where Landon had booked us a suite. That weekend was nothing like I'd imagined. Landon spent most of it on his phone dealing with some property drama in California. When we did talk, it was about market trends and commission structures. The sex was mechanical, and afterward he'd immediately check his emails. I lay there in this fancy hotel bed thinking about how Gregory always held me after, how he'd trace patterns on my back, and make up silly stories about our future. But I was in too deep to admit I'd made a mistake. So when I got home, I gushed about the fake team building, showed Gregory photos I'd found online of Sedona hiking trails, even bought him a coffee mug from the gift shop to make it seem real. He displayed it in the kitchen next to his collection of novelty mugs, this tangible reminder of my lie sitting there every morning. The lies got easier after that. Work conferences that didn't exist, client dinners that were really dates, late nights at the office that were spent at Landon's condo. I became an expert at deception, keeping track of my stories in a notebook I hid in my car. Gregory never questioned any of it. He'd ask how my day was, listen to my made-up stories, offer to run me a bath after my long client meetings. 6 months into the affair, I convinced myself I was being sophisticated. This was what successful people did, right? They had arrangements, they lived complex lives, they didn't settle for simple happiness. I started dropping hints to Gregory about wanting more. A bigger house, fancier vacations. Maybe he should consider getting his contractor's license so he could take on commercial projects. He'd listen patiently, then remind me that we had everything we needed. That happiness wasn't about square footage or stamp collections in our passports. I thought he was being small-minded. Now I know he was being wise. The annual real estate conference in San Diego was real for once. 3 days of seminars and networking at the Grand Del Mar. I'd actually been looking forward to going legitimately, to not having to lie. But then Landon suggested extending the trip, turning it into a long weekend. "Tell your husband the conference runs through Sunday," he said, like lying to Gregory was as simple as changing a restaurant reservation. And I did. Added 3 fake days to a real trip, even sent Gregory photos from the conference to maintain the illusion while Landon and I drove up the coast. I was sitting in a restaurant in Laguna Beach, eating $40 salmon while Gregory texted me about the new tile he'd found for our guest bathroom, when something inside me finally cracked. I missed my husband, not in some grand romantic way, but in the small, steady way I'd been taking for granted. I missed how he made coffee in the morning, strong with just a splash of cream. I missed his terrible jokes, and how he'd laugh at them himself. I missed the weight of his arm across my waist at night, and how he always made sure I had a glass of water on my nightstand. I told Landon I wanted to go home early. He shrugged, already scrolling through his phone for his next whatever. On the drive back to San Diego, I decided I was done. I'd end things with Landon, stop the lies, recommit to my marriage. Gregory never had to know. I'd just be a better wife, make up for everything without him realizing there was anything to make up for. But the universe has a way of exposing lies, just when you think you've gotten away with them. My flight home was delayed 6 hours. I texted Gregory that the conference was running long, that I'd be home late. He offered to pick me up from the airport whenever I landed. Sweet, dependable Gregory, who'd probably been looking forward to showing me that guest bathroom tile all weekend. When I finally got home at 2 a.m, exhausted and guilty, Gregory was awake. Not just awake, but sitting at our kitchen table with his laptop open, my work calendar pulled up on the screen. The real conference schedule was on the table, printed out with the dates highlighted. 3 days, not 6. "Stephanie called," he said quietly. Stephanie was my co-worker, his poker buddy's wife. She wanted to know if you'd gotten home safely from the conference since she saw on Instagram that you'd left early. I stood there in our kitchen, my luggage still in my hand, trying to find words that would make this okay. But there weren't any. There was no explanation that would undo the last 6 months of deception. "Were you with someone?" His voice was so calm it scared me. Gregory wasn't a yeller, but I'd never heard him sound so detached, like he was asking about the weather instead of our marriage. I could have lied. Could have made up another story about extending the trip for personal time, needing space, anything. But standing there in the kitchen he'd renovated with his own hands, Looking at this man who'd loved me so steadily for 11 years, I couldn't do it anymore. Yes. He closed the laptop slowly, like he was moving through water. How long? 6 months. He nodded, stood up, walked past me to our bedroom. I heard drawers opening, the sound of a suitcase zipper. I followed him, tried to explain, tried to minimize it. It wasn't serious, it didn't mean anything, it was already over. Every word sounded more pathetic than the last. Gregory packed methodically, the same way he approached every project. Shirts folded neatly, pants rolled to prevent wrinkles. He didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't even look at me. When he zipped the suitcase closed, he finally met my eyes. I'll stay at my brother's tonight. We'll figure out the details later. Gregory, please, can we talk about this? We could have talked 6 months ago. We could have talked before you decided I wasn't enough. We could have talked instead of you turning me into a fool who helped you pack for your affair weekends. The Sedona mug. He knew about the Sedona mug. I'll get the rest of my things while you're at work. Don't contact me unless it's about the house or the divorce. And then he was gone. No slammed doors, no dramatic exit. Just the sound of his truck starting in the driveway, those rusty bumpers I'd been so embarrassed by carrying away the best man I'd ever known. I called in sick to work for 3 days, sitting in our house surrounded by everything Gregory had built for us. The custom bookshelves, the outdoor kitchen, the bathroom tile he'd never get to show me. I texted, called, emailed, even wrote an actual letter. Every attempt bounced back into silence. On the 4th day, I went to his brother's house. Gregory's truck was in the driveway, but he wouldn't come to the door. His brother Vince stepped outside instead, looking at me like I was something he'd scrape off his shoe. He doesn't want to see you. I just need 5 minutes. You had 11 years. You chose to waste them. When I got back to my car, there was a text from Landon asking if I wanted to get drinks. I deleted his number and drove home to an empty house. The divorce was quick and clean, just like everything Gregory did. He didn't want alimony, didn't fight for the house, didn't even ask for his tools from the garage. He wanted nothing that would require him to interact with me. I got everything, except the one thing I wanted, my husband back. I couldn't afford the house on my own. Even with my real estate salary, the mortgage was based on 2 incomes. I listed it myself, staged it perfectly, sold it to a young couple who gushed about the custom work. The wife ran her fingers over the kitchen cabinets Gregory had installed, talking about all the dinner parties they'd host. I wanted to tell her to appreciate it, to not take for granted the kind of man who builds you a dream kitchen. Instead, I took their offer and signed the papers. The money from the house went fast. Lawyer fees, the apartment deposit, paying off the credit cards I'd racked up trying to keep up with Landon's lifestyle. Turns out those fancy dinners and weekend trips cost more when you're not letting someone else pick up the check. I lasted 2 more months at the real estate firm before everything imploded. Landon had moved on to a new agent, someone younger who believed his stories about leaving his wife. Stephanie and the others who knew about the affair treated me like I was contagious. My sales dropped, my confidence evaporated, and when they offered me a severance package to leave quietly, I took it. That's how I ended up at the dental office, making $14 an hour answering phones and scheduling appointments. My coworkers are nice enough, but they're all 20-something years old talking about their weekend plans and Tinder dates. When they ask why I'm single, I tell them I'm focusing on myself. The truth, that I blew up my marriage for martinis and a man who couldn't even remember my middle name, is too pathetic to share. I see Gregory sometimes. Tucson's not that big, and we ran in the same circles for over a decade. Last month I saw him at the farmer's market, the one we used to go to every Saturday. He was with a woman, pretty in an understated way, laughing at something he'd said. She was holding a bag of the Armenian cucumbers he always loved, the ones I always forgot to buy. I watched them from behind a flower stand, saw how he touched the small of her back to guide her through the crowd, the same way he used to touch me. He looked good, happy. He'd fixed the rust on his truck bumper and was wearing a new shirt I didn't recognize. The woman said something that made him throw his head back and laugh, that genuine belly laugh I used to love. They walked past without seeing me, and I stood there holding organic tomatoes I couldn't really afford, watching my husband be happy with someone else. My therapist says I need to forgive myself, that everyone makes mistakes. But this wasn't a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk or missing an anniversary. What I did was a calculated campaign of deception against a man whose only crime was being satisfied with our life. I traded a real partnership for the illusion of sophistication and ended up with nothing. The cactus isn't the only thing dying in this apartment. There's a succulent on the windowsill turning yellow, an aloe plant that's gone soft. Even the supposedly indestructible snake plant is developing brown spots. I buy new ones, convinced each time that I'll do better, that I'll remember to water them properly. But I either neglect them or overcompensate, drowning them in attention they don't need. Gregory would find this metaphor too on the nose. He never liked it when movies spelled things out too clearly. "Trust the audience," he'd say, usually while I was explaining to him what I thought was happening in whatever we were watching. I miss movie nights on our couch, even the ones where he'd fall asleep 20 minutes in and I'd have to catch him up later. I joined a gym last month thinking exercise might help with the depression. It's one of those fancy places with eucalyptus towels and fruit-infused water, the kind of place Landon would have approved of. I go at 5 in the morning when it's mostly empty, run on the treadmill while watching the news on mute. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the mirror and don't recognize the woman staring back. She looks older, sadder, like someone who's learned too late what actually matters. My sister calls every week from Ohio, careful not to mention Gregory, but always asking how I'm doing with everything. My parents don't call at all. They loved Gregory like a son, and I think they're grieving the loss of him too. Mom sent me a birthday card last month with just her signature. No love, no note about hoping my year is wonderful. Even Hallmark can't find words for a daughter who threw away a good man. The dental office closes early on Fridays, and I've started taking long drives through the desert. Past the saguaro cacti and rock formations, windows down even when it's too hot, music turned up loud enough to drown out my thoughts. Sometimes I drive all the way to Mount Lemon, park at one of the viewpoints Gregory and I used to love. The temperature drops 20 degrees up there, and I sit on the hood of my used Honda, looking out at the valley below. Last week there was a couple at the same viewpoint, clearly on one of their first dates. They were nervous and giggly, trying to impress each other with facts about the elevation and the wildlife. The guy spread out a blanket and produced a grocery store cheese plate that he'd clearly put thought into arranging. She acted like it was the most romantic thing she'd ever seen. I wanted to tell them to hold on to that, to appreciate the grocery store cheese phase before they started thinking they needed something fancier. Instead, I got back in my car and drove home to my empty apartment. I've thought about moving, starting fresh somewhere Gregory and I never lived, but running away feels like another form of lying, and I'm trying to live more honestly now. Even if that honesty is ugly and painful and served with a side of microwave dinners for one. The hardest part is the silence. Not just the literal quiet of living alone, but the absence of someone caring about the minutiae of your day. Gregory used to ask about the houses I showed, remember my clients' names, celebrate when I made a big sale. Now I come home to dead plants and neighbors I've never met, eat cereal for dinner while scrolling through social media feeds full of happy couples. I unfollowed Landon months ago, but I looked him up last week in a moment of weakness. He's engaged to the new agent from our firm, a blonde named Madison who looks like she believes all his stories. There's a photo of them at the exact restaurant in Laguna Beach where I realized I missed my husband. The irony isn't lost on me, but it doesn't sting the way I thought it would. Landon was never the point. He was just the excuse I used to destroy something real, because I was too foolish to value it. My lease is up in 3 months, and I'm trying to save money to move somewhere nicer. Somewhere with better light for plants, though I'll probably kill those too. The dental office offers a small raise after a year, And if I'm careful, I might be able to afford a one-bedroom instead of a studio. It's not the life I planned, but it's the one I earned. Sometimes when I'm scheduling appointments, I use Gregory's old phone number as a test entry to make sure the system's working. It's disconnected now, has been for months, but I still know it by heart. Still know his social security number, his coffee order, his favorite brand of work boots. All this useless knowledge about a man who's actively forgetting me. I've started writing him letters I'll never send, filling notebooks with all the things I should have said. How sorry I am, how stupid I was. How clearly I can see now what I couldn't see then, that he was offering me something worth more than any luxury car or beachfront property. He was offering me a life built with intention and care, filled with small moments of genuine happiness. And I traded it for nothing. The woman I saw him with at the farmer's market, I've seen them together twice more. Once at Home Depot, where she was helping him pick out paint colors, laughing as he held up swatches. Once at the Mexican restaurant that used to be ours, sitting in what used to be our booth. They were sharing the fajitas we always used to get, and he was laughing at something she said. She doesn't look like me at all. She's shorter, curvier, with dark hair she wears in a simple ponytail. She looks like someone who appreciates a man who can build things with his hands, who finds joy in simple pleasures, who wouldn't dream of lying about conference dates. I hope she's good to him. I hope she thanks him for the coffee he brings her every morning. I hope she loves the tile he picked for the guest bathroom. I hope she never makes him feel small for being satisfied with a good life. I hope she gives him everything I was too selfish and stupid to give. The cactus is still on my kitchen counter, brown and shriveled, but still standing. I can't bring myself to throw it away. Every morning I water this dead thing, like maybe if I'm faithful enough now, it will somehow make up for all the times I wasn't. The water pools at the base, goes nowhere, changes nothing. But I keep doing it anyway. This small, pointless ritual of too little, too late care. 3 months since Gregory found out. 1 month since the court said it was over. But the real ending happened the night he closed his suitcase without looking at me. And here I sit in my studio apartment in downtown Tucson, surrounded by dying plants and deafening silence, finally understanding what I had only after I made sure I could never have it again. The truth about consequences is that they don't arrive all at once like some dramatic movie scene. They accumulate slowly, like dust on a surface you keep meaning to clean. You lose your marriage, then your house, then your job, then your sense of who you are. You downgrade and downsize until you're a 39-year-old woman starting over with nothing but regret and the kind of wisdom that comes too late to matter. I still drive by our old house sometimes. The new owners painted it, changed the desert landscaping Gregory had personally designed. There's a soccer goal in the front yard, and children's toys scattered on the porch. They're building a life there, a family, a future. Everything I threw away for 6 months of meaningless sophistication. Tomorrow I'll go to work, answer phones, schedule appointments, smile at patients who don't know I used to sell houses worth more than I'll make in a decade. I'll come home to this apartment, water my dead plants, eat a meal alone, and try not to think about what Gregory and his new girlfriend are doing. Maybe they're cooking dinner together in a kitchen he renovated. Maybe they're sitting on a couch watching a movie, her head on his shoulder, taking for granted the kind of comfortable intimacy I'll probably never have again. But I had it once. For 11 years, I had a man who loved me, a home filled with warmth, a life that was simple and good and real. I had everything, and I threw it away because I thought I deserved something more impressive. Turns out the only impressive thing in my life was the man I was too blind to appreciate. The cactus will stay on my counter until it turns to dust, a monument to my failures, a reminder that some things once killed can never be brought back to life, no matter how much water you pour on them afterward. Just like trust, just like marriage, just like the love of a good man, who did nothing wrong except marry a woman who didn't know what she had until it was gone.